Hi everyone, my name is Miss Kavita and I'm from the Lilburn branch of the Gwinnett County Public Library. Welcome to the 10th episode of our Culture Craft series. Today we are honoring Native American Heritage Month. November is National Native American Heritage Month. During this month, we take the time to recognize the people, culture, traditions, crafts, and music that existed in the United States before it became what we know today, as well as honor the many sacrifices, contributions, and achievements of Native American people and celebrate their rich and vibrant culture. There are over 600 tribes in the US, and each tribe has its unique language, food, dance, songs, stories, and beliefs. The month of November was recognized as National Native American Heritage Month by former President George H.W. Bush on August 3, 1990. In today's program, we will read a story as well as learn more about the indigenous people of our country. So let's begin with this story called Fry Bread by Kevin Noble Maillard. Navajo fry bread originated in 1864 when the United States forced Indians living in Arizona to make the 300-mile journey known as the Long Walk and relocate to New Mexico onto a land that couldn't easily support their traditional staples of vegetables and beans. To prevent the indigenous people from starving, the government gave them canned goods as well as white flour, processed sugar, and lard, the makings of fry bread. For many Native Americans, fry bread links generation with generation and also connects the present to the painful narrative of Native American history. It is often served both at home and at gatherings and can be found at state fairs as well. The way it is served varies from region to region, and different tribes have different recipes. So, are you ready for this story? Let's begin. Fry Bread, a Native American family story, written by Kevin Noble Maillard, illustrated by Juana Martinez Neal. Fry bread is food: flour, salt, water, cornmeal, baking powder, perhaps milk, maybe sugar, all mixed together in a big bowl. Fry bread is shape. Hands mold the dough, flat like a pancake, round like a ball, or puffy like Nana's softest pillow. Fry bread is sound. The skillet clangs on the stove. The fire blazes from below. Drop the dough in the skillet. The bubbles sizzle and pop. Fry bread is color: golden brown, tan, or yellow, deep like coffee, sienna, or earth, light like snow and cream, warm like rays of sun. Fry bread is flavor: see beans or soup, smell tacos, cheese, and vegetables, delight in honey and jam, rise to discover what brings us together. Fry bread is time: on weekdays and holidays, supper or dinner, powwows or festivals, moments together with family and friends. Fry bread is art: sculpture, landscape, portrait, our daily craft, shared from teacher to student, a cycle of heritage and fortune. Fry bread is history: the long walk, the stolen land, strangers in our own world, with unknown food, we made new recipes from what we had. Fry bread is place: Alaska, Kansas, all the way to Maine, down to Delaware, on to Georgia, over to Oklahoma, Colorado, and California, cities and lands we call home. Fry bread is nation: Abenaki, Apache, Arapaho, Navajo, Seminole, Sac and Fox, hundreds and hundreds of tribes. Fry bread is everything: round, flat, large, small, north, south, east, west, brown, yellow, black, white, familiar and foreign, old and new. We come together. Fry bread is us. We are still here, elder and young, friend and neighbor. We strengthen each other to learn, change, and survive. Fry bread is you. We also have a fry bread recipe by the author, which is right here, and you can try it at home if you like. Wasn't that nice? Let us now watch a brief presentation that will give us some more information on Native Americans. What is this? The first people to live in a land are called the indigenous people. This means they were the original settlers. The Native Americans are the indigenous people and culture of the United States. People lived in the US long before the arrival of Christopher Columbus and the Europeans. These people are called Native Americans. Sometimes they're also referred to as Indians or American Indians. This is because when Columbus had first landed in America, he thought he had sailed all the way to the country of India. He called the locals Indians, and the name stuck for some time. So, who are they? The Native Americans were grouped into tribes or nations, usually based on the area they lived in and their cultures, such as their religion, customs, and language. Sometimes smaller tribes were part of a bigger tribe or nation. As best as historians can tell, these tribes were fairly peaceful prior to the arrival of Columbus and the Europeans. There were hundreds of tribes throughout the US when Columbus first arrived. Many of them are well known, such as the Cherokee, Apache, Cheyenne, Inuit, Shawnee, Seminole, Navajo, and many more. So, where did they live? Native Americans lived throughout North and South America. In the US, there were Native Americans in Alaska, Hawaii, and the mainland of the US. Different tribes and cultures lived in different areas. In the middle of the country lived the Plains Indians, including tribes such as the Comanche and the Arapaho. In the southeast area of the country lived tribes such as the Cherokee and the Seminole. So, how do we know all this? The Native Americans did not write down or record their history, so we have to find out about their history in other ways. Today, archaeologists are able to learn a lot about past cultures by digging up artifacts such as tools and weapons. Much of what we know comes from the recordings of the first Europeans to arrive. We can also learn from traditions and stories that have been passed down within the tribes from generation to generation. Native Americans lived in a wide variety of homes. Different tribes and people built different types of homes. What kind of homes they lived in depended on the materials that they had available where they lived. It also depended on the kind of lifestyle that they lived as well as the environment. Some tribes were nomads. This meant that the entire village would travel from place to place. And this was common for tribes living in the Great Plains where they hunted buffalo for food. The tribe would follow the large buffalo herds as they roamed the plains. These tribes built homes that were easy to move and build. They were called teepees. Other tribes lived in one place for a long time. This was because they had water and food nearby. These tribes built more permanent homes like the pueblo or longhouse. Let's take a look at some more Native American homes. Wigwam home, the Native American hogan, plank house, igloo, chickie, wattle and daub. Depending on the tribe and the area they lived in, Americans got their food by different methods, including farming, hunting, fishing, and gathering. Most tribes used a combination of these four ways to get their food, but many specialized in one area, such as farming or hunting. Many American tribes grew crops for food, but the experts in farming tended to come from the southern states like the Southeast and the Southwest. The main crop that the Native Americans grew was corn, which they called maize. Maize was eaten by many of the American Indian tribes because it could be stored for the winter and ground into flour. Maize was eaten nearly daily by many tribes and was a major part of much of American Indian culture. Hunting. This was a big part of Native American culture, especially in the Great Plains area of the country. They relied heavily on the buffalo that they also called bison. Not only did they eat the buffalo as food, but they also used much of the buffalo for other areas of their lives. They used the bones for tools and the hide for blankets, clothes, and to make covers for their teepees. Fishing. In the coastal areas or near large lakes, tribes would specialize in fishing. They often used spears or nets to catch fish. Fish could be smoked or dried to be stored for the winter. Gathering. Gathering is when people get their food from the environment around them. Native Americans would gather food such as berries, nuts, or other fruit from naturally growing trees and berry bushes. Most Native Americans used gathering to get some portion of their food. Native American clothing prior to the arrival of Europeans was different depending on the tribe and the climate where the tribe lived. However, there are some general similarities. The primary materials used by Native Americans in their clothing was made from animal hides. Generally, they used the hides of animals they hunted for food, and many tribes, such as the Cherokee, used deerskin. So, how did they make the clothes? Well, all of their clothes were made by hand. The women would generally make the clothes. And oftentimes, clothing would be decorated. The Native Americans would use feathers, animal fur, such as ermine or rabbit, porcupine quills, and after the Europeans arrived, glass beads to decorate their clothes. Well, what did the men wear? Most Native American men wore a breechcloth. This was just a piece of material that they tucked into a belt that would cover the front and back. In many areas, especially areas with warm climates, this was all that the men wore. In cooler climates and in the winter, men would wear leggings to cover up and keep their legs warm. What about the women? Women generally wore skirts and leggings. Often they wore shirts or tunics as well. In some tribes, like the Cherokee or the Apache, the women wore longer buckskin dresses. Well, they also wore footwear. Most Native Americans wore some kind of footwear, and this was usually a shoe made of soft leather. In the cold northern areas like Alaska, they wore thick boots. Let's look at some fun facts. Prior to the Europeans arriving, American Indians used wood, shells, and bone to make beads to decorate their clothing and make jewelry. Later, they would start using the Europeans' glass beads. The brain of the animal was sometimes used in the tanning process because of its chemical properties. Plains Indians sometimes wore breastplates made of bone for armor when going to war. The most popular kind of headdress was not the feathered one you see on TV a lot, but one called the roach. The roach was made from animal hair, generally stiff porcupine hair. Elaborate clothes, headdresses, and masks were often used in religious ceremonies. Well, what about the role of men and women? No matter where Native American tribes traveled in America, there was a lot of work to be done to survive. They had to hunt, farm, prepare food for the winter, build homes, make their own clothing, and protect themselves from the enemies. Although each tribe and region was different, the division of labor between men and women was generally similar across most tribes. The women were responsible for work around the house, like cooking and raising the children, and men were responsible for work away from home, like hunting and raiding. What typical men and women work here is a general comparison for what men and women were expected to do. But did you know? There are some interesting facts about the roles of men and women. In some cases, men worked on detailed crafts such as the ceremonial jewelry. The women were in charge at home. They often owned the home and everything in it. Women were well respected in the tribes for their hard work and providing food from farming. Men and women had different roles, but generally had equal rights. In some tribes, the chief was a man, but he was elected by the women of the tribe. Today, around 25% of Native American tribes that are recognized by the federal government are led by women. Art. Native Americans of the US have many different kinds of art and ways they use to express themselves. Each tribe and nation had its own unique art and culture. Their art is depicted in a number of ways, including beading and decorating of clothes, masks, totem poles, paintings, drawings, weaving of blankets and rugs, carvings, and basket weaving. So let's take a look at some historical examples of Native American art. Language and symbols. Symbols are used to tell stories. Each one represents a unique aspect of life, human spirit, and nature. The meaning behind an Native American symbol is almost always rooted in nature, both its larger significance and the design of the character itself. Each symbol is an attempt to extract meaning from the natural world and a device used to gain strength, insight, and reassurance from the spirit of all things. While prominent symbols generally retain their meaning throughout the Native American culture, there is often a difference in exact interpretation and understanding from tribe to tribe or even person to person. Symbols may be understood universally or used to communicate privately within a family or tribe. The dreamcatcher is one of the most enduring and widespread symbols associated with the Native American culture. It is commonly believed that the iconic hoop and web form is meant to protect sleepers from bad dreams by catching them while letting good dreams pass through, hence the name. However, the real story behind dreamcatchers is a little more complex, and some also see it as a symbol of unity among tribes. Another story behind the dreamcatcher goes like this. Protective objects appear in numerous indigenous cultures, but the dreamcatcher typically associated with Native Americans originated in the Chippewa culture. Traditionally made from a willow branch hoop, nettle fiber, or sinew, and decorations such as beads and feathers, the origins of the dreamcatcher are associated with a figure from the Ojibwe mythology known as the Spider Woman. The mother figure was a protector of the people, especially children. Dreamcatchers became a proxy as the nation spread over larger geographical region, a tool hung over children's beds to capture any bad or evil that could cause them harm. Nearly every part of a dream catcher has a meaning. The wooden hoop was either circular or teardrop shaped. It served primarily as a frame for the web, but some believe it represents the circle of life. The web, traditionally patterned after a spider's web, was to catch bad dreams and keep them from entering the dreamer's head. Numerous purposes are assigned to the feathers that hang from the hoop. Many believe that they provide a soft ladder for the good dream to glide down and gently enter into the dreamer's mind. How about a dream catcher craft? Today's craft will be a take and make dream catcher. This take and make craft pack has all the supplies you need: the hoop, the colorful strands of yarn to make the web, feathers and beads, as well as colorful pom poms. You can stop by the Lilburn branch of the Gwinnett County Public Library and ask for your Native American Heritage Dreamcatcher craft bag. All materials and instructions are enclosed in the bag. So stop by and get yours today as supplies are limited. I really enjoyed that, and I hope you did too. As you can see here at the Gwinnett County Public Library, we have many books on Native American heritage, the various tribes, cultures, and much more. So make sure you come and check them out today. Also, don't forget to come and pick up your Native American heritage take and make craft bag to make this dream catcher. Just come by the Lilburn branch and ask anyone for your take and make craft bag for Native American heritage. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.